Welcome to Speaking Candidly with Candace, where we talk in depth with everyday people about their challenges, their fears, and their triumphs over mental health conditions. I'm your host, Candace Schoner, and I hope over the next half hour you'll be engaged, enlightened, and inspired to live your best life. My guest today is Troia Butcher. Troia is an amazing inspirational speaker, an author, and a life coach. Troia recently released a new book called Soul Ties, Love Letters, and she started a new initiative to support our frontline workers during COVID. Troia, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, as we discussed before we actually did the podcast, I was up late last night reading your fabulous book. It is so well done that I think that's a good place to start. So could you share with the audience the title Soul Ties and what it actually means?
Okay, so the letter soul, the book, Soul Ties, Letters of Love, Finding Ways to Live Through Loss. The title Soul Ties, it was a book that I tell people all the time that should never have been written, but in 2019 I had several significant losses, to include my grandmother, my mentor, my best friend within a span of, I think, 6 to 8 months. And it was really difficult for me to move forward. And what I realized as I was going through working out my grief, what I realized was that there are people who are indelibly tied to us, and it goes back to the scripture of in the biblical relationship of Jonathan and David. It says their souls were knitted together, and that really just means that there are people that have come through our lives. To me, people have come through our lives that have left an imprint, and we can, even though they're not here, we can still draw from the lessons, the relationships, everything that they have given to us. And the relationship doesn't necessarily die because they're no longer physically here. So when we're thinking about the title, that's how it came to be, is the fact that these people are still with us, and I draw daily from all the people that have come through my life.
Well, I thought the timing when we met via the internet, that it was for me serendipitous. As I mentioned to you, I had 3 losses: a brother, a good friend, and my pet. And grief is hard for everybody. I know that in reading your book, when you were little, you lost your brother. So can you talk a little bit about that and your letter to him in the book?
My brother. So I was a senior in high school when my parents were pregnant with our younger brother, and we were really excited. And unfortunately, we didn't get to meet him on this side. He was stillborn, but we still had a relationship. We still had an expectation. We still loved him, even though we saw him, of course. I mean, he was already expired, but passed away. That's the wrong word to say. But we knew him. We celebrated his life because he was still growing in our parents. And it was at the time, I think I was 16 at the time, and we had the opportunity. Our parents gave my brother, my sisters, and I the opportunity to name him. And it was very important that we named him and let him know that even though he did not breathe on this side, we loved him, and we knew who he was, and we had this expectation of him. And it was hard because soon after I was headed to college. So, but we named him after 2 of our great uncles, so that he knew that, because we named him after our Uncle William and our Uncle Eddie. They were very, very 2 very strong people in our family, and we thought it was important that we gave him the name so that he knew that we still loved him, and and that he was a integral part of our family. When I think about it, when I thought about it the other day, I was like, wow, he would be like 34, 35, almost 36 now, and I was like, wow. Yeah. I wonder what kind of man he would be at this point. So yeah.
You the book about grief, you do life coaching about grief. And what advice do you have for people going through this who are, either recently suffering a loss or maybe suffered a loss a couple years ago but still feel those pains?
The one thing that people don't do is, and I have my podcast, if I can mention, is good grief. And the reason we named it good grief is because the only bad grief is when it's not done. And grief is not this linear. Today I feel good, today I doesn't. There's spurts, and people have to understand that you can do well today, and then tomorrow it's going to be a day where you don't want to get out of bed. So what I would say to people who are grieving, whether they've lost someone today, tomorrow, 5 years ago, be gracious with yourself and give yourself the opportunity to break. And it's okay to break. It's okay not to be okay, because we treat grief very, very differently here in our culture. We expect people, we give businesses, and there's nothing wrong with that, give 3 days of bereavement, but you're expecting someone to be over the loss of someone that they've known all of their lives, whether it be a mother, brother, cousin, friend. That bond is hard, and I would say, because I had to give myself that, and I didn't know that when everything happened, that I was allowed to be in this moment. I was allowed to say, I'm not okay. And we have to take the moment, and those moments, it'll be different. It's going to be a different look, and people say not the new normal, but it will be different. And what does that different look like? And you can't experience the newness until you understand the brokenness of where you are in that moment. And each moment will get better, but but it's okay to be kind to yourself in those moments.
We're in this time with COVID, and obviously how important it is, and I know your initiative to provide gifts to the first responders or items of helpfulness, including a journal. Are you big in journaling, and have you found it very helpful?
I am, and and that was one of the reasons. Our mantra is the healing journey begins when you let it out, and whatever that looks like to you. For me, it was writing, and that's how I got to the book. Because when my best friend passed in July of 2019, the overarching feeling that I felt was anger, and because it just didn't make sense, but I had to move forward with my life, and so the only thing I knew to do was to get it out, was to write. And I just began to write and write and write and write and then write some more. I wrote him a letter, I wrote God a letter, because I was like, none of this makes sense to me, but it has to make sense, and I have to keep moving. Like, I have 4 little people, and I had to get out of bed, so I had to figure out a way to get out of bed. So journaling was very, very cathartic for me. It may not be for everyone else, but here's the thing though. I was recently in a course, and they said write 6 things. Just write a 6-word sentence. It doesn't have to be a long sentence. A 6-word sentence of what that person means to you, or what that loss has meant to you, and you'll see how it will just free you of some of the pain that you might be feeling.
Was the letter to your friend the first one for the book that you wrote, or did you write them in order of the book?
He was the first. His was the very first letter that I wrote, and my editor, a lovely, lovely lady, she said, Troia, that one's too raw. She said, that one's too intense. It was him, then my grandmom, then my mentor, because those were all the ones that were very recent in 2019. So she said, well, why don't you go a little bit further and work everybody up to the rawness and the newness of the letter with your best friend.
I think that was probably pretty good advice as one who's read the book. You also included a love letter to one of your dogs. And we all grieve the loss of pets.
Yes.
I recently lost mine, still having a hard time with it. What do you say to people who are grieving the loss of a pet? And when other people say, well, that's no big, I hate to say it, but a lot of people feel like we shouldn't grieve the way we grieve for people over pets.
And I would say to the person who was grieving the loss of a pet um, shut people out because people will not understand, and people are not going to understand the relationship that you have with. I mean, my Durkee, his name was Dirk, and I had him for almost 12, 13 years, and he was very much a part of our family. Christmases, he got. He was a part of our family. He was an ornery somebody, but he was still a part of our family, and he was very protective of our family. Even though he was a little Shih Tzu, he was very protective of our family, and for a long time, I didn't want a dog, but my oldest granddaughter wanted one, so we got a new dog. But they are a part of your family. They are somebody that you're taking care of. You do take care of a dog. You do form a bond with them. And with any grief and with anybody, I would, again, just shut them out. They don't understand. If they don't understand, then that's where they are. That's not you don't have to take on. And so often we take on what everybody else is saying. I should be over this. Right. I shouldn't be thinking this way. But it's your feelings.
That's actually excellent advice. I'm going to kind of back up a little bit. You're in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. You mentioned grandkids, and I told you earlier that I didn't think you looked any older than 25. So give us an inside view into your life and how you're able to raise your grandkids, do your life coaching, be an inspirational speaker, do a podcast. How do you do it all?
I'm a preacher's kid, and the one scripture that my parents had always taught us was Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ which strengthens me. And on my podcast, I had a good friend, and it wasn't my podcast a couple months ago. A good friend of mine came on, and we were talking about that particular scripture. And and she gave me a whole new perspective that I wasn't even thinking about. And she said, we get the strength because of we're doing the very thing that we're put on this world to do. And when I'm not, and I was in IT for many years, and that wasn't where I was supposed to be. But being this life coach is where I'm supposed to be. Raising my grandkids is where I'm supposed to be. All of these things is where my life path is supposed to be right now. So I have the strength to do it, only because God has given me the strength to do it, quite honestly. Because most days I'm like, I'm raising 4 kids. You have your life. I mean, all the things you just said, plus there's other things that I do outside of just those few things. I was like, how in the world do I do it? But again, it's all God, and I just really I get the strength from Him.
Before I go on to another question, I do want to make sure that people know how to connect with you. So would you share your website with the audience?
Sure, absolutely. My website is very easy. I tell everybody it's www.Troia.com, and you can find me everywhere on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, I think, at justtroia.com as well.
That is actually a great address. So, you obviously are a very compassionate person. You support a lot of people. Who do you go to for support?
My go-to person was, of course, my best friend at the time. Well, of course, he's gone. But I have a really good family structure. My parents, thank God, are still here, and they're very supportive. Then I have my brothers and my sisters, and we're all very close. But I also have really good friends. And then my very special friend, he is a very he makes sure that I stay level and grounded, and if I'm having a moment, I'll just pick up the phone and say, hey, it's one of those days, and he kind of centers me. But then also again, if you haven't noticed, I'm a person of faith, and God and I have several conversations multiple times a day. So I think my faith is what helps. But I have some people that I'm able to call and I tell everybody to pick up the phone if they need to, and just pick up the phone and call me, or hang up, and I actually have some that I can do the very same thing too. So I'm very fortunate in that way.
Can you share, without naming names, but who usually hires you as their life coach?
It really depends. Like right now, we're working with people. Since we're working with people that are grieving, I have a few clients that are actually in the throes of grief right now. I also have people who may not be grieving the loss of a person, but of a situation, and so we've been working with people like that, but also from outside of the life. Well, I guess it's all tied in. I mentor or facilitate with women who are in recovery, and we kind of work through it with what they're doing, and so we implement a lot of what we're doing as a life coach in that arena as well.
Wow. When do you sleep? Uh, I mean, it sounds like you are constantly on the go.
Well, sleep and I have an interesting relationship because I'm a veteran of 8 years from the Army, and so my relationship with sleep is different because I suffer PTSD from being in the first Persian Gulf War. But
Wow.
so I try to get to sleep as much as I can when I can, and then again you just keep moving. But now as with the last few years, I'm moving more purposely. Before I was just on autopilot. Now I've learned to be more purposeful in what I do. I don't, because I used to be like, okay, yes, 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 yes to everything. And then a few years ago, when I found out about the PTSD, my sister gave me a really lovely button that says no in several different languages. So, so I had to learn to say no for the thing that didn't belong to me. And because when people think that you can do a lot of things well, they tend to throw, oh, well, Troy can do it. It's almost like Mikey. Mikey would eat anything, and I had to learn to say no, and to do the things that are more purposeful.
For those of you who don't recognize the Mikey reference, it was an old ad for Life cereal where Mikey would try the cereal, and being that we're a similar age, I got the reference, so thank you for that. PTSD is quite serious, and not only do people get it coming out of the military, but I think a lot of people are getting it going through COVID. So how has the
Yes.
pandemic affected your life and what you're doing to help others?
Oh, when the world shut down, I went from having no children at home and working to having six children at home and trying to work. Because a good friend of mine, her two daughters, she was essential, so she had to go to work every day. So she needed somebody to help her with her children. So of course you're supposed to help out with the world. The world was shut down,
Right.
so I had six children. All of them were school age. I mean, all of them were in school. The three youngest were in daycare at the time, and then we had a third grader and a fifth grade, two third graders and a fifth grader, and then the daycare actually had class online. So that was an interesting time in my world. So it was trying to navigate all of that, and I kind of when everything happened, it was crazy. I just kind of pulled back from everything and had to focus on the little ones and figure out that whole process before I can actually sit still long enough to work with people. At the beginning of the pandemic, it really was the focusing on the kids and making sure the kids were okay. Um, and that was bad. But as things start, and then on top of that, helping out with my parents, making sure that I would, because they wouldn't, so they didn't have to go to the store. We would go. I would make sure that they were doing everything. So it was really focused on family at that point. But as things started loosening up, I was able to. And the kids, the littles were able to go back to daycare, and then we got on a schedule. So then I was able to get back to working with people again.
You mentioned about being on autopilot and then moving to being more intentional. I want to explore that a little bit more. So do you think that autopilot is our mechanism for coping for a lot of people?
For me, what I can say for me, because like I said, that 2019 was hard. I had to get up because at the time, it was just my oldest granddaughter with me, but I had to prepare. I was preparing for the three younger ones to come. So I had to get up and I had to keep moving. And I knew if I checked in on my feelings that I would stay in bed. So it was keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. Uh, Shania has to go to school. Shania has to eat. You have to get things prepared. You have for the three littles. Mom and dad, they still have. I mean, so it really was. Don't check your feelings. Don't check your feelings, because if you do, it's going to interrupt your schedule. And then I hit a wall, and the wall said, you're having emotions right now, and you need to check them. You need to figure it out, and you cannot just continue to be on autopilot because you're missing so much. Yes, Shania's eating. Yes, Shania has clean clothes, but are you checking in on Shania with her schoolwork? Are you checking in on Shania with other things? So I had to stop. Once I hit that wall, the wall made me look and say, hey, you're missing out on so much life because you're afraid to feel. Even though the pain is intense, feel it so it can be healed and you can actually live, because you're not living your life. You're just going through your shell of who you were, and that's not your best life. So that's what stopped me. I hit a wall.
So speaking about the wall, and then I personally, when I hit a wall, I go to my therapist and I talk to her about that wall and how to break through it. Do you see a therapist or do you see a life coach?
Being, again, raised in the church, you're taught certain things, and then add to that the pastor's kids, you're taught certain things about dying and death, but never about the grieving part. So when my friend passed away, I didn't know what to do with it, and I went to go look at my usual places, church, the community. There was really nothing. So I took myself to therapy, and I'm a proponent of therapy. Had I never gone to therapy, I would have never known that I had PTSD a few years before all this happened. So I knew I needed help because it was just too much. It was too much grief, and so I was able to work through it with her, and I'm very grateful for the time I spent with her. But absolutely, if it gets too rough, I pick up a phone and say, hey, I need to come and see you. I need to get this out. So she was great. She really was great. And again, she's the one who gave me the permission to break. She's the one that gave me the permission to say, Troia, you're not okay today. Troia, it's okay to tell people not today. So I was very grateful for her giving me that license to work through my issues.
Can you share with, besides your wonderful book, other resources that people can go to if they're experiencing grief?
If you can't find anyone to work specifically with grief, I would say wholeheartedly seek out a therapist, seek out a life coach, seek out anyone that you can talk to get it out. And there are resources online that you can read. One good program is Grief Share, and they have a 12-week support group. And I think they're doing theirs online right now. That's a really good program, and they walk through the whole grief process. There's another one, Scattering Hope is another organization that works specifically with people who are grieving the loss of somebody who committed suicide. So there's a lot of resources, a lot of people, and if you go online, there's another one, but they're in the UK. They're the Grief Gang. But if you go on to Instagram, they do some really good work as well.
Well, thank you. Grieving. We are out of time. I could talk to you for days. I want to really. I want to take a moment to thank our supporters for this program: Jill DiArpino, Michelle Fowler, and Wendy Repass. And of course, I want to thank the fabulous guest today, Troia Butcher. And thanks for listening to Speaking Candidly with Candace. And remember, every cloud has a silver lining.